Welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrities, powered by Empowering Science Foundation. Today we are fortunate enough to have Professor Ramaswamy Subramanian with us, and a brief introduction of him is Professor Rams has done his bachelor's and master's from National College, Trichy at Bharati Darshan University, and after that he followed his dream for being a researcher, passion. So he moved IISc Bangalore for his PhD and then shifted another postdoctoral research fellow at Swedish Agriculture University. And after that, he has been co-founder and first CEO of CCamp Bangalore, where the ignited brains researchers take that leap of faith to turn their ideas to companies. At that same time, Sir was a senior professor and dean at INSTEM Bangalore also. And since then, he has served as co-founder, board member, or scientific advisor for multiple startups or companies. Presently, Professor Subramanian is at University of Purdue, and he's a professor in biological sciences as well as biomedical engineering. We welcome you, Professor Ram.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So let's start the conversation with our tag question: that how and when you wanted or decided to be a researcher?
That's actually a difficult question. I don't think it was not a momentary decision. I think when I was in class 12, I was in a government municipal school in Erode, and the physics teacher has told us that all of those, in India, everybody wants to do engineering and medicine. And he wanted everybody who wanted to do engineering and medicine in the front two rows because he could help them get high marks to get into engineering. The marks were the only criteria. And he said, all of you who want to do engineering medicine, come to the front. And for some reason, I didn't go. And then he asked me, so what did you want to do? And he said, I want to do research. I'm not so sure it was a very well thought out answer. I only said that because I know I didn't want to be an engineer or a doctor. That was all I knew. So, and I didn't, and then, but when you were pointedly asked, so what do you want to do if you don't want to be that? The first thing that came to my mind was, okay, I want to do research. So it was not planned or anything like that. But then I stuck to that. That's the only thing.
Wow.
So, I made a commitment, so I just went on.
So as class 12, becoming a researcher, and this is not this present era when people have access to all the internet, all the information, so they can be more subtle even at age of in 19s and early teenagers. You were so what was that? So when you decided that you want to be a researcher, and after following the passion till now, if you can share the journey as and when, what happened.
You say that, and then you sometimes forget about it. So there was a long hiatus where I had forgotten what I want to do. So I studied physics after my class 12 because of, not because, again, I thought physics is a great subject or I wanted to be a physicist. I went to the nearest college and said, I want to study. Here is my mark list. And just my class 12 mark had come out. And they said, oh, you have got very good marks in physics and math, so you should study physics. Okay, that was how I studied physics. Okay, it was not, again, anything intentional or thought to do. And then I finished my bachelor's, and then at the end of my bachelor's, in my third year of my bachelor's, in my generation, getting a public sector job was a big deal. So my entire class went and wrote the Banking Services Recruitment Board exam to be a clerk, right? And we are not finished our bachelor, so we are not eligible for anything else. And I also went and wrote the exam because it was like a picnic with all my classmates. But I didn't know what I wanted to do at that point. Okay, it was not because I wanted a bank job, but I got a bank job. And so after my BSc, I went home and I was waiting for my appointment letter. And then the marks of BSc came out. And then I went back to the college to collect my TCE. And in India, they have this TCE that you have to collect and you have to preserve it. Otherwise, you won't get your next job. So I went to collect my TCE, and professor who was the head of the Department of Physics at National College, Professor Sabesan, he was just become the vice principal of the college as well. And I had done my BSc project with him. It's a trivial project, but I'd done that with him. And then he said, what are you doing? Classes have started. Why are you not in the class for MSc? I said, I didn't apply. And so he said, what are you going to do? I said, I got this job to be a clerk, and I passed this exam. He said, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to study MSc. So, but I said, I'm not joined, I'm not paid tuition, nothing. He said, no, you go to class now, we'll worry about all that later in the evening. And I went to class, and he said, go home. My parents were there in Madurai. He said, go to Madurai today night bus, tomorrow come and join. So it's an accident. So I said, okay. And I went to my dad and father and told him, this is what Professor Sabesan wants to do. I don't know what to do. He said, yeah, you will all, if you can pass an exam and get a bank job once, you can get it again. So go do your MSc. So I said, okay. So I went and did my MSc. And then that was when I got more interested in research. I was more interested at that point of time in theoretical physics. Mm-hmm. And then by the time we finished our masters, we were the first batch of this exam called GATE, which now everybody takes. Mm-hmm. So me and a very good friend of mine, we took the GATE exam, and I got a very good score. Mm-hmm. I had a very good friend called Giri. Mm-hmm. He is the one who said that I should pursue research. He kind of pushed me into this. And I wrote the IISc entrance examination. I got through the IISc entrance exam. I was interviewed, and I really didn't want to do anything except biology. I wanted to move into life sciences at that point of time. That's a long story. We won't go why I decided to do that and why I do crystallography. It's a separate story. And then, but I was in the waiting list in the molecular biophysics unit. Since I had my GATE score, I also got into MTech at IIT Kharagpur. Mm-hmm. Into multiple places. But I went to Kharagpur because Giri was going to do his MTech at IIT Kharagpur. So, and there is another friend of ours who was going to do his MTech at IIT Kharagpur. So we'll all go to IIT Kharagpur and do an MTech. And that point of time, I was really not interested in the engineering side. So I decided that I would do an MTech in human resources management, right? So I wanted to do business. I changed my opinion. Got into the course, started there. And then I was not in the waiting list anymore in IISc. And they called me and said, hey, you're not on the waiting list. You can come and join if you want. Now, I was not sure what I should do, whether I should stay in IIT Kharagpur or go back and join IISc. And again, Giri pushed me saying, yeah, no. You always want to. And Giri was also my classmate in class 12. And he's the one who reminded me at that time that, remember, this is what you said in class 12 when the physics teacher told us. So here is your opportunity to do that. So go do that. So I went to IISc, and then I just followed that. And I really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. I did very well. I was a slightly above average student during my BSc and my MSc. I was not the best student in the class. But I think joining IISc for a PhD opened my mind up, and I really enjoyed my time there. I had a fantastic PhD supervisor in M.R.N. Murthy. It changed my life, and I realized, okay, hey, I can do this. This is my passion, and I never left it up. So that was my. I did my PhD, and again, my main PhD project didn't work, but I had done a lot of things on the side. Kind of submitted my thesis, and then I got an opportunity to go to Sweden. Again, it was an accident that I got to work with Professor Hans Eklund. Mm-hmm. It was not planned. I went to work with Professor Hans Eklund, and again, luck would have it, he was an amazing mentor. He one of the smartest and the nicest people I've known. Normally, we think of successful scientists as arrogant and not very nice. He was one of the amazingly nice person, but very, very successful. It gave me enormous amount of freedom to explore, do what I want to do. Met many people, began to publish, travel. And one of my collaborators was from the University of Iowa Medical School, a guy called Bryce Plapp. I still collaborate with him, published a paper this year with him. He's 80 plus now. Continue to collaborate with him. And he connected me to one other person called David Gibson. And David Gibson has been working on, at that time, I was doing X-ray crystallography, was the primary technique that my own expertise was. And David Gibson was working on an enzyme that he had collaborated with a number of people over the last 15 years to solve the structure, couldn't solve the structure, connected me with David Gibson. Again, it was a lot of accidents, it was not planned, thought through. And I said, I'll give it a try. We solved the structure. And then David Gibson, Bryce Plapp, and another person called Bob Deshane decided that they should recruit me to Iowa. So after 8 years in Sweden, I said, okay, I'll go to Iowa. I spent 10 years in Iowa. And there again, a number of things changed. I set up a crystallography facility. And the idea was a very simple minded thought process where the way people do science, you think of people doing science, they do two different ways of thinking about how to think about science. One was that I ask a question, like I want to study a phenomenon. Then I would use a bunch of tools to solve the problem. The other was, I'm a molecular biologist, I'm a crystallographer, I'm an electron microscopist, I'm a fluorescence microscopist. And then you have a core technique in which you're an expert. And those days, and even today, to become a real expert in a technique takes years and years of training. And then what you do is you see what questions you can answer with the techniques that you have solved, right? And that kind of bothered me very much. And so what I did when I went to the University of Iowa was said, I'm going to set up this core facility in such a way that people who want to use crystallography, even if they're not experts in crystallography, should be able to use it. Techniques are tools, and people should use the best tools to answer the scientific questions and not worry about if they had the expertise or not. And that was the idea with which I set it up. It did very well. And then the university said, oh, this is a nice model. Let's try this to do, if you can do NMR. So we went and set up an NMR facility. And that also, we hired people. Many people started using it, just not the NMR spectroscopists or just not the crystallographers, right? And then they said, and that point was a turning point again in my life where I was asked by Mike Apicella, you seem to do this very well. Why don't you take a more senior administrative leadership role and ask me to be the assistant dean of the College of Medicine? And I was 41. I was a tenured faculty. I had my grants, and I told him, I don't want to do this, right? My science is going very well, and now taking a role like this would change me. But he pursued, and he made me do the job. And I realized that as much as I like doing science, I also like the fact of enabling scientists to succeed. So I did that for 4 years. And then I met Professor Vijayaraghavan and Dr. M.K. Ban, who convinced me to come back to India and set up something different. So I went back and spent 10 years at the Institute for Stem Cell Biology. And I didn't know one stem cell from the other when I started, but I was not hired to be the stem cell biologist because the other person who was hired at the same time was Professor Jyotsna Dhawan, who's a carrying stem cell biologist. We got along very well. We had a good time. And she taught me everything I need to know about stem cells, worried more about the science, and I worried more about how do I get land for how do I get the building going, how do I get land, how do I work with the government, how do I hire faculty, how do I put processes. And that was a very exciting journey where I learned how to build an institution from scratch, and I'm proud of that. And I had good help and friends like Jyotsna with whom I could do this kinds of things, right? So it matters who your company is, and the journey is more fun, even if it is difficult, if you have good people to do the trip with, right? So that was a great time. But CCamp was a different beast. When I was being recruited to set up Instem, one of the things that bothered me was the idea of Instem was to bring groups of people to work together in order to solve problems. And it always bothered me that, yeah, sure, you could solve a problem, but for it to be useful to people, it has to be translated into something that is economically sustainable. That's not an academic job. That's more a company job. And we needed some vehicle method by which we could take this and go there. And I realized that we need to prepare for that along this time we were setting up the Stem Cell Institute as well. So that was one thought in the back. The other thought, what I realized when I visited the campus and I visited NCBS, where and it is in that campus that we were incubated while we set up in STEM, was a place like NCBS had enormous amount of resources. They had some of the most high-tech equipment in flow cytometry, in fluorescence microscopy. And I was talking to people in the industry in India, and they had no access to this. And there was no companies in India that could afford crores of rupees and buy these equipment. And even if they buy the equipment, they couldn't get people with that much of training to use it. So it went back to my Iowa days of you could have instruments, everything could be available. If it's not accessible, then it's not very useful. So Sri Kumar Suryanarayana, who was then the head of ABLE, Association of Biotechnology Enterprises, is the vice president of president of research at Biocon, Satyajit Mayer, who's now the director of NCBS, and I got together and we talked about it, and we said, let's create an entity which is not an academic institute, but a not-for-profit company, which will work in the interface between academia and industry, right? And we'll have two goals. One is to take all of these resources available that is already existing in NCBS, that Instem will create, and make it available for startups, make it available for industry so that they get the high-end resources. It will also open the minds of faculty members to go and connect with industry, understand what industry is doing. And again, a lot of the thought process, a lot of the ideas in terms of where we should go came from, it was collective thought. Again, the journey was great, and they are both Sri, Jitu and I are still in the board of CCamp, and it has been a great journey. Again, just like in Instem, my journey with, it was the Jyotsna Dhawan collaboration that made the journey, we could do it. Here it was Jitu and Sri to start with. All this time, remember, we had tremendous support from a person called Dr. Bhan. Without his support and DBT saying, yeah, it's completely crazy. And in fact, in 2010, Forbes wrote an article with Vijay Raghavan and me saying, and then there are people who commented saying that this is a great dream, but it'll never succeed in India. Okay, but it's okay. So and Dr. Bhan supported the dream, and Vijay Raghavan helped us. I mean, so it was great. So and then at that point of time, we started CCamp, and then again, luck plays an important role. Taslim Arif Syed was then a postdoc at UCSF. He was looking to come back to India. He wanted to be in the interface of industry and academia, didn't want to be a faculty member. So recruited him as the first person to work at CCamp. and he's brilliant. I mean, and he started with me. Today he's the CEO. He's doing very well. So a lot of the idea of CCAM's entrepreneurship. How do you set it up? What to do? Was a journey with Taslim, and he drove that idea while I worked with Sri and Jitu on how do you set up large facilities and how do you operate the facilities. It was working with Taslim, and a lot of credit goes to Taslim for his ability to pull that off, right? And then CCAM started doing entrepreneurship. Dr. Bhan said at that point, but nationally this should happen, and CCAM cannot do that, and they created BIRAC, and the rest is history. I mean, today Indian startup biotech environment is extremely good, and they're doing very well. And I think it's a lot of. I think the timing was right. We had the right support. I look at this as I had the great opportunity to participate in this. I had a nice group of people who were willing to support me. I learned a lot, and it was a lot of hard work, but I think it was great fun. So then, after I would agree to come to India for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, the Instem building was not ready. The idea was to make CCAMP a self-sustainable entity. At the end of 5 years, it was not self-sustaining yet. It was there. It was close to that. So Vijay Raghavan convinced me that I should take for 5 more years and finish this journey. So I stayed back, finished Instem building. And then at the end of 7 years, I had already decided that I can't. Instem had grown, CCAMP had grown. I didn't want to do either. I didn't want to take this side or that side. So I had told them that there should be a full-time CEO for CCAMP, and there should be a full-time director who's dedicated to Instem. By the time Jyotsna had gone back, finished the 5 years, and back to CCMB. So at the end of 7 years, I knew I was leaving. And now that CCAMP had a full-time CEO, we advertised and we recruited, and Taslim was the best candidate. It was very easy. So he's doing extremely well. And I know where I left CCAMP. I know what CCAMP is today. CCAMP is doing much, much better than where I left it. I'm very glad. And the Instem has a full-time director now, Manisha and Amdar, because still I was there for the first 7-8 years. It had a same director for NCVS and Instem, and as the dean, I was responsible for the whole thing. It didn't have its own director, but then the first director, full-time director, was Apurva Sareen, and now it's Manisha and Amdar. So they are in their own journey. They're doing very well. So then I had a small crisis of what am I going to do, right? And I decided I want to go back to science. I want to spend much more time, and I was continuing to do science. I was still publishing 4-5 papers a year. At that time, cryo-EM, electron microscopy, was just picking up. The Nobel Prizes had not yet been awarded, and decided that I'm going to learn cryo-EM. And the best way to learn was spend some time in the UK, in MRC, a couple of weeks, and a couple of weeks in Netherlands, where the microscopes were being built. I wrote a proposal to Government of India, got the first national cryo-EM facility in Bangalore, and did some cryo-EM structures. And then it was an accident again in terms of coming to Purdue. The president of Purdue, the vice president, and a few faculty were visiting Bangalore. They came to CCAMP. They saw what we had done. And then I was having dinner with the vice president of Purdue at that time, and Professor Richard Kuhn. And I said, hey, I finished 9 years. And at the end of 10 years, I'm thinking of coming back to the US, and I'm going to start looking for opportunities. And they said, come to Purdue. I said, to do what? We'll find out. We'll find something for you. Right. And I came to Purdue. And the reason for moving back was also because I felt I had done enough in India. And I couldn't see what I would do next. By this time, I'd already become a dreamer. I dreamed big, and I wanted to do big things. And I couldn't envision anything that I could do that would be bigger than what I had done in Bangalore, right? So that was kind of the thing that made me walk away. But but I didn't want to do much big things at Purdue. So I'm now spending most of my time in the lab. My lab is only 3 people. I'm in the lab working, doing science, doing very well. Started some new projects, doing extremely well. I mean, I'm enjoying my time at Purdue, just being in the lab, doing my science, doing a very little bit of administrative work, but not much, less than 10% of my time.
Mhm.
So I've had a very interesting journey, and along the way, some of the work done in my lab, we translated, we started companies. I met people who were interested in investing in companies. So that journey was a parallel journey where I could combine my science and ask myself, how do I translate my ideas into a product? How do I market it? What do I do? So that journey happened in parallel. So I continue to enjoy my time. I have a research program, which is very basic biology. I have a few companies that I continue to work with, but at very early stage. I also consult for other people. So the message that I have is, look, I did not plan my life. Okay. If you read a book like what Venki Ramakrishnan's book, right, The Gene Machine,
Mhm.
when he was doing his master's degree, he knew he wanted to get the Nobel Prize, right?
Mhm.
And he did everything to get there.
Mhm.
I don't know how I got where I got.
Mhm.
I did things that I like to do. I got very lucky. I had the right people around me and the right environment around me, and I just enjoyed the journey rather than plan a trip.
Nice, sir. That journey, and here I have now I have to make this statement for all the viewers. In the conversation, what you have heard is a word called accident a lot of time. Professor Ram is the epitome of modesty, I will say. And for accident word, John Ruskin said once that quality is never an accident. It is always the result of intelligent efforts. Professor Ram's were very, very focused and dedicated that he wanted to be a researcher. I don't know how many of us doing research at any stage of their career knew that they wanted to be a researcher at class 12 and not coming to like they knew that he doesn't want to be a doctor or an engineer, he wanted to be a researcher. So everything fall in place. If you have intent, nothing can move you out, and Professor Ram is a living example of it. So sir, when you have walked all of the possible scenarios in a life of a researcher, be it academics, be it industry, be it administrative also, because now people are coming up with more innovative ideas that if a startup has to be in an administration post, they want a hardcore researcher who can understand and do all of that. Which part of this you enjoyed the most?
I can't say which part I enjoyed the most, right? It's a time and space dependent thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know. I there was a period of my time where my focus was on working in the lab, and in the initial days where the focus was on, uh, you know, uh, I need to do something that will be textbook material,
Mm-hmm.
right? Very, very basic science. And I remember working very hard. And today, some of the work that I did, my early work that we did, are textbook material.
Mm-hmm.
And I really enjoyed it. But then once that happened, you suddenly realize, okay, I'm 37 years old. The work I did is in textbooks. What do I do now? You're looking for new things to enjoy. And that's the journey, other journey starts. I can't say I enjoyed one more than the other. I enjoyed things at different times in my life. What gave me pleasure was different things at different times in my life. But I enjoyed being a scientist. I continue enjoying being a scientist. The one thing that has kept me constant was the fact that even during all of these other stuff, I still worked in the lab.
Mm-hmm.
I still did work. I can today, if somebody gives me a crystal, I can collect data, solve structure, refine, deposit in the PDB, write a paper. I can do all the whole stuff, right? So that's what I call my nirvana. When I can do all the other stuff and I go back to that, right? I carved out time to do science. Is that the one that gave me most pleasure? No, that gave me the calmness that I needed to deal with the other stuff. But I really enjoyed institution building. I really enjoyed doing companies. I really enjoyed working with the government and policy. I enjoy influencing people. And I think today what I enjoy most is mentoring people. So I'll give you, my current crisis, right? I have a lot of big ideas. But I feel like if I'm just going to do science for the next 10 years, is there a big idea like what I had when I was young that I would like to do for the next 10 years? Or one science question that I want to do, just this one science question I want to answer. I don't, okay? So it bothers me that I don't have that, but I know what problems I want to solve. And I know there are 50 scientific questions I want to answer. But I don't have a single scientific question that bothers me so much that I want to pursue it for the rest of my life, right? My initial career was a very simple question. I was interested in electron flow in biology. Where is this electron going? How is this electron doing this when biology was all anaerobic and it became aerobic? Biology recruited iron to use control oxygen. And my focus was on understanding how this iron-oxygen interaction works. Iron goes to the oxidized state, to the reduced state, to the different states, and it does reactions that even today people cannot do in a chemistry lab. How does that do that? And that was like this one question that I was obsessed with, right? And majority of my papers are on that question. But today, I ask, okay, what is the next thing I want to do? Okay, I wouldn't say I want to answer that question, but I've done a lot of work in that area, and I feel satisfied that I've contributed to that area significantly. And if you ask me today, what are the next thing that you're going to do? I don't have anything. So I feel like I'm better off having younger people who have these kinds of passions, who have these. And having done the journey, I could probably help them think through. How do you do this? What do you do? And today I enjoy that more. But I also enjoy something else, which is thinking of the big picture. I think the way we are doing science is going to change. It's changing very fast. And I'm taking you in a different direction, but so I'll stop there. So I'm more interested in today how science is done and the relationship of how science is done with society and the changes in the society. And what are the changes happening? We have not settled on a new way to do science, but I have some thoughts on where it should go and how it should go and how to create institutional change and create institutions that are more responsive to the environment, right? So I also enjoyed that thought process. So I spend my time doing a little bit of science because that's, as I said, that's happening in the background all the time, right? I'm already continuing to do experiments. I spend time mentoring young people who have smart problems, who I feel who have a fire in their belly, who are passionate, and how do you help them solve those problems? And the third is, look, I know science is changing. How we're going to do science is going to change. And it is a necessity of the environment timing. And I have some thoughts on that. So these are the three things I do now.
Nice. So, sir, now towards the end of the conversation, I would like to ask the word of wisdom when, with this experience of yours, with the exposure, as you briefly mentioned that you love to mentor the young researchers, the passionate ones. What are your word of wisdom for the budding researchers, either who are thinking of considering to be in PhD or the one who completed their PhD and in the postdoc, like at different stages, how should they consider to be in research when they feel that they don't belong to because of, that so many things doesn't work out in research? What are your suggestions?
I think, so this is the advice, this is one piece of advice I've always followed in my life. I mean, therefore, this is not an advice, this is my experience. Most people have problems because they use their brain to make decisions. Okay. When you are making decisions about what you should do, whether it's your personal life, who you should marry, to what food you should eat, to what science you should do, You make that decision. If you think you want to make decisions logically, you collect information, but all the information required to make a rational decision is not available today for any scenario. And therefore your brain will make decisions which are often wrong, or you will change, right? And so my advice is, ask your gut and your heart, what is it that you would love to do? And then use your brain to get there. Your brain is not a good decision maker, but your brain can then say, I have decided I want to go from Bangalore to Chicago. What is the best way? Sorry. But do not let your brain decide whether you should go to Chicago or whether you should go to South Africa or whether you go to Japan, because your brain has no way of making that decision. So decide what you love. Make your heart decide. And use your brain to execute. That's the only piece of advice I have.
That was great. So for the audience, I would like to say, as Professor Ram says, life doesn't come with instructions. It's okay. Make mistakes, as long as you learn from them, correct them, and just work on it. So here, I would like to thank you for taking time out to share the journey with us. And I would ask all the viewers and audience, if they want to connect to Professor Rams directly, he's all over the web. You can just type his name and you'll find him. He's a courteous person. Also, if you write an email, you get response. When we do this Researcher Celebrity series, not many of the people do respond, but he was one of those who, and one more thing which I cannot skip is the humble. As sir said that there are scientists who are successful, are arrogant. Probably, I have not met any of them yet. And Professor Rams is just opposite of that. Doesn't matter how successful he as scientist himself is, he has made others also. But as sir has shared so many names during the conversation, Professor Taslim and another CEO of it, supporting them. You are successful, it's good. Supporting them, bringing another's dream to their destination is what a good mentor does, and Professor Rams is one of them. So please feel free to write to them if you want Empowering Science Foundation to connect to our researcher celebrities. Feel free to write to us. And thank you very much, sir, for your time. And we look forward.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And as I said, more people I can influence and more people follow their passion, the better it's for the world.
Thank you, sir.